Okay, is that working? Yes. Menopause. If it's not your problem, it will be. Hands up here who thinks 60 is old. Now look at your neighbor before you answer. Who thinks 60 is old? Okay, so we all agree that 50 is not old then. The average age of a woman going into menopause is 50 years old. But if I'd asked you to imagine a menopausal woman, you might have imagined someone who's 75. At that point, that female has been in menopause for 25 years. So if I get one thing through to you today is that menopause is not an aging disease. What we call it is accelerated aging. So we are protected from almost every disease you can name except for autoimmune. We're protected from kidney disease, AKI, CKD, even something like polycystic kidney disease, which is a genetic disease. Almost very few women go into a transplant situation, but many men do by the age of 50. So diabetes, asthma, Alzheimer's, vascular cognitive impaired dementia, we're protected from these until menopause. And menopause again happens at about 42 when perimenopause, and by 50, that's the average. So half of the people have, or more than half have gone into menopause. And yet all our preclinical testing is done in male rodent cells, you name it, right? And that's still true. Most of it's done. And if you look at the data, why this is important to you, I'm not selling anything today. This is a call for action. So 8 of 10 drugs recalled between 97 and 2000 were because of adverse events in women. Clinician last week in Kidney Week said, basically a drug's accepted by the FDA and then the clinical trial starts in women. Think about that, right? AKI, adverse effects of common drugs, cause more AKI in women than men. So what's the solution and the call to action? Well, female models of disease, know what cells you're using, and be transparent. I'm an editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Physiology. Identify the sex of the data. You don't have to analyze your study separately, but at least give your data points an identity, right? Know if it was male or female. But I am going to tell you about a model that you can use because some of the responsibility of not using females is on us scientists. We didn't have the models. Ovarectomy in rodents is cutting out of the ovaries. That only happens to 5% of women going into menopause. So we have developed a mouse menopause model, and we're happy to help people get this going. And basically, why this is important, again, in hypertension, what I study in kidney disease is that 2/3 of hypertensive women still don't have their blood pressure under control using the drugs that you guys know and commonly used. And that's different to men, and the responsiveness gets worse as you get away from menopause. So the other problem is ACE inhibitors. The side effects are 2 to 3 times more common in females than they are in males, and hypokalemia and hyponatremia. And yet we still don't have clinical guidelines to even control blood pressure or talk about controlling blood pressure in women. The European guidelines had 2 lines about women that just came out for hypertension. One was early menopause, surgical, again, very few women, and the other was polycystic ovarian syndrome, and that was it. So what we do is we use a model that is a toxic model, and this is the ovary, not the kidney, for those of you who don't recognize it. And basically, it's a toxin. It kills the eggs in the ovary of any of. It was discovered to be toxic in humans in the rubber industry. The mechanism is well known. My colleague in Arizona developed this model. And basically, once the ovary loses the follicles, it goes into ovarian failure and there's no more estrogen. This is a great model for studying ovarian failure in rodents or menopause, mousopause as we call it. And basically, it's an ovary with, that's the follicle replete and then the follicle deplete. Why is this important? Well, it's the levels of estrogen and testosterone that change. As we go through menopause, we lose estrogen, testosterone stays where it is, and it's that level that changes the androgenic fat deposition, the hair, the skin in women. And if you cut out the ovaries, this tissue here is important in women because it still secretes testosterone. And if you cut it out, it doesn't happen. And in this model, we can actually detect androstenedione. So we think it's more physiological. It also, she compared it to the humans. If you've got a human going through puberty, you get regular cycles. As you get older, you go through menopause. The cycles get a little wonky, as we say in Britain. If you inject the VCD in, the mouse mimics this. Estrogen drops, FSH goes through the roof. but you have this perimenopause. So now you guys can do interventions in perimenopause. There's no other model in it in rodents that goes through this very defined perimenopause phase. And the ovarian tissue is there. We've used it for metabolic syndrome. You all know the metabolic syndrome criteria. And one of the things that you need to remember is that women with diabetes are 8 times more likely than women without to die. And we've shown that visceral fat adiposity, the women in the room are going to cringe, but this is on a regular diet. This is a mouse in menopause for 12 weeks on a regular diet, and look at the abdominal fat pads. It has liver steatosis. We've shown hypertension accelerates in this model. Asthma, rodents are protected. You name it, it's pretty much been studied in this model. So again, this is really a call to action for you guys in your industry and your biotech scientists in the room. Please use females, or at least know the sex of your data, right? Because we really need to be studying these so that my goal is that when my daughter goes through menopause, she has a lot better data than I did. I'm taking estrogen. Estrogen turns the lights back on for many women. It's not a bad thing. That Women's Health Institute study was appalling. They put 75-year-old women in with 50-year-old women and then gave them all purified horse urine, Premarin. It was basically 27 metabolites, and they said that was estrogen. So think about it, and I'm basically asking people to just think about looking at sex differences and identifying important issues in women's health. And I'll take questions.
Right here, Lydia.
Yes.
I'm assuming this is published?
Yes.
Okay. I'll reach out to you for the
Yes, we've got reviews, and we're happy to help you guys
And
set it
share
up.
mouse models as well.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Yes.
How do you induce menopause in mice?
It's a toxin that you inject, and the longer you inject, the quicker they go into menopause. So if you inject for 10 days, you can get a long perimenopause because you're killing the primary follicles. That's all it's doing. It's specific for the primary follicles. It gets metabolized by the liver and becomes toxic to the ovaries.
Pretty fast.
It depends. If you inject for 20 days, you're in menopause. That animal's in menopause within about 50 days. So yeah, we do cyclicity every day to know exactly the day that they're in menopause. And it works in any knockout, and again, we're not looking at aging, right? Aging is very different to menopause. Menopause is the loss of estrogen.
Other questions? It's a great call to action.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks.